We talk about trust erosion. There are so many steps that in my mind can be solved for. If you can ask ChatGPT to do XYZ and it could take 2 or 3 seconds and spit out the fairly thoughtful answer, why can't you understand your benefits and ask someone those same sort of questions? And those are the questions that we're talking to our clients a lot about. There's universal agreement that if more people could understand their benefits, that takes a significant friction moment out of the equation and allows people more care and more awareness of what they're getting.
Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Before we jump into today's conversation, just a quick reminder and ask, if you enjoy the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review wherever you consume your podcasts. Makes a really big difference in our ability to continue to bring valuable insights to dental professionals everywhere. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Ben Baenen, the Director of Healthcare and Life Sciences at West Monroe, a leading business and technology consulting firm. Ben is a results-focused healthcare leader with over a decade of experience. He's led transformative projects for healthcare organizations, focusing on operational efficiency, process improvement, and strategic growth. He's worked across the payer value chain, implementing new technologies and strategic initiatives to enhance patient engagement and operational performance. Ben, I've been looking forward to this conversation. It's great to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
What an intro. Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Pumped to be here. Mike, you and I have crossed paths a few times, so I've seen the podcast, I think, and it's fun to be here and do this with you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for being here. To start, maybe to set the stage here for folks, if you could give some background for those that don't know, what is West Monroe? What do you all do? What is the function of the organization? And then I know that's a lot of questions, but maybe where do you sit within the organization? What's your area of focus?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So West Monroe is a professional services kind of full scale technology business operations transaction advisory consulting firm. So we're about 2,000 employees, headquartered here in Chicago, which is where I sit and live. And West Monroe has a healthcare oriented practice. And within that practice, I lead our dental team, which does everything from kind of both all the way to like kind of claims processing, payer side of the business, through kind of provider offices, dental offices, and then I'd say every kind of technology that really sits in between those organizations. I think one of the things that makes West Monroe unique is, we have a really world-class kind of advisory business that works with private equity firms. And so within that space, we advise on both kind of buy side and sell side kind of diligence projects where we'll help private equity firms understand, technology operations, product, market, sort of assessments as firms look at making investments on assets, both coming up for sale and for purchasing. So it's really neat, and I think where West Monroe thrives is really when you take our transaction advisors and you pair those with kind of our industry leaders. And that's where we do some really, really cool work. I've been at West Monroe for about 18 years, and the past 10 has really been focused on kind of this dental and supplemental benefit, kind of ancillary benefit services space. And I'll try to keep this kind of quick, but essentially, our healthcare practice was built up with around dental claims processing. And then as more investment started to come into kind of the practices and the practice management technology, we started to get exposed to a lot of that work through our private equity channels. And that's where kind of that intersection has started to become just really interesting for us and really interesting for our clients. Just trying to really help kind of companies create and think about value in interesting ways. So, yeah, a little bit about West Monroe, but we're a really great fun firm. Love what I do. And like I said, I've been there a long time.
No, that's great. And I do want to dive into kind of that intersection, because I agree it's an interesting space, and you're touching on insurance and claims and payers, and that's all very much kind of hot button these days in the dental. But before we get there, maybe kind of taking a step back for you, said that 10 years now you've been in the dental space, and you now lead the dental function there. When you made that transition, where were you transitioning from? And at the time when you were like, "Hey, okay, like I'm gonna go jump both feet into this dental business," was it exciting to you at that moment? And if not, like, when did it become exciting to you?
You know what? It's so funny, like, all my friends still think I just work in a dental office every day, which couldn't be further from the truth. I wouldn't say I jumped in, it was this kinda master plan I had. We did a lot of work in kind of this supplemental benefits, so we did, things like, behavioral, critical illness, short-term, long-term disability. We started to see increases interest in, like, vet and vision. So I think we really capitalized on a moment in time when a lot of the big consulting firms were chasing large health plans, which is rightfully so. They have bigger budgets and that sort of thing. We decided to kind of double down on dental, and that's where I really learned claims. And if you would have told me this 20 years ago, for me to say claims, is cool or fun, I'd laugh at you. But we really leaned into that space and had a ton of fun going deep, and we started to notice that our clients, they loved that we had a dental specific capability and perspective, which is why I think kind of at that moment I said, if I'm gonna do this, like I'm gonna go as deep as I can and learn as much as I can about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, no offense, but I think some people still today would chuckle a little bit if you were saying that claims and insurance, and payers was fun and exciting.
Yeah.
It has become, there's such a spotlight on this segment of the dental business today, but you've kind of had a unique, experience and view over the past decade. When you think about where things have come to where they're going, what are some of the big changes that you're seeing? What are some of the things that people can be positive about in the dental space that you think will affect change, moving forward?
I think there's a lot to be excited about in dental, which again sounds crazy, but I really do believe that. I think the kind of adage of dental being a bit of a kind of a window into overall wellness is something that I firmly believe in. And I'd say the healthcare market in the US is facing some challenges right now, mostly related to cost in my mind, and how those costs are being offset, um, just do make it challenging within the entire ecosystem. We read, that dental is essentially 5 or 6% of all US healthcare spending. I see that number going up because I think a lot of young people and quite honestly, not young people, just people in general, they want to go to the dentist, they wanna be in the offices, they want to kinda be confident about the way they look and appear to people. And, the most interesting thing to me is the interest in being in the dentist and then what the dentist can then do for that patient's kind of overall healthcare journey, and being able to see certain things in the chair, being able to do some tests in the chair, and then being able to start thinking about coordinating care kind of across, kind of the broader healthcare ecosystem. So, I'm very bullish on kind of where the space is going. I think we've just kind of tapped the surface of thinking about where technology can start to become a foundation for someone's healthcare journey, of having data at their fingertips, having their history all very accessible, and talking to people about what they can be doing to be overall kind of more healthy. So, I'm excited about kind of the interest in dental. I'm excited about the path forward with integrating into kind of a more holistic kind of healthcare journey. And then I'm really bullish on where the technology is going to drive behavior changes, experience, adoption, scheduling. There's a lot to be excited about there.
Yeah, when you talk about the integration that is taking place or the opportunity for that, what are some of the things that you see? I know, dental sometimes gets knocked for not having the same type of interoperability that is available in the broader healthcare space. There's maybe not the same data standards across different solutions that make it easy for patient data to be transferred and used and leveraged. If somebody moves to a different state or a different city. And so there's these kind of like technology limitations already currently in place. Do you see some of those barriers being reduced? What are some of the interesting things that you see people working on right now?
Yeah. A couple things come to mind, Mike. I think interoperability is always just is it's just a buzzy word that we've talked about for forever. That being said, I think there has been more interest in the ecosystem talking and the ecosystem being more collaborative than ever before. And when I say ecosystem, I kind of go back to the world that I sit in, which is you have provider offices on one side and you have payers on the other side. And then you have some really cool technologies and solutions that sit in between them. You have clearinghouses, you have, you know, AI tools, you have kind of integrators, you have experience layers, you have all those things that kind of sit in between. And typically, the ecosystem has just been highly fragmented, and that a bend take like that. I think everyone would agree with that. Um, but when you talk about interoperability, I view interoperability as more interest on both ends of that spectrum playing nice together. And I would say a couple years ago, we've done some work where we actually we'll bring clients together. We'll bring practices and payers together to talk about, for example, why a certain provider is calling into a payer's call center and driving call center times, typically checking for claim status, checking eligibility, those sort of things, and coming together and saying, "Hey, how can we solve some of these problems that, quite frankly, aren't that hard to solve?" It just requires people to come to the table and be a little bit more open minded about, some technology that maybe 5 or 10 years ago was a little bit scarier. I just think people are more interested and technology officers are more interested in talking. I'd also say my technology leaders also appear to be more interested in meeting and sharing ideas, which is really exciting. We like to be at the kind of the table and bringing clients together. And I'd say 10 years ago that wasn't happening all that often, and we see it a ton more right now.
We see it too, and I think it's encouraging. There's a wider swath of technology providers that seem to be eager to find better solutions and remove friction from what is otherwise a process filled with it. I am curious from your perspective, related to the payers, because in this space, I don't have nearly the experience you do. I've been in dental now for roughly 6 years, but there's often a knock on the payer side from the offices themselves, from the practices, from the providers. I think we all recognize that. And it's like it feels like things are made harder than they need to be. And there's often challenges with reimbursements. People all struggle with denied claims. It seems like friction at times has almost been, if not intentionally inserted, certainly not actively solved for. And so, you have relationships with these folks and you kind of get an understanding of where their mind is at with it and what the viewpoint is. Do you think that there is a real appetite now to remove these barriers that have so long existed with the only thing that's consistent across all the pairs is the inconsistencies? And, is that something that seems to be where people are looking to solve for it now?
Short answer, yes. I would love to hear your answer to that question too, but I would say short answer, yes. Um, I think one of the maybe trends that we've seen more on the payer side is as kind of AI adoption increases and more use cases are being picked up and looked at as for consideration within some of these organizations. At the end of the day, a lot of these payer teams, they're sales teams, they're claims processors, like they're building in claims processing rules that were sold to commercial groups. Those groups then give all of those benefits to their employees. And I think there is a perspective that a lot of the friction comes down to, I guess, perspective and I guess maybe misinformation of like what benefits were covered. And I think that's a challenge that the healthcare ecosystem is facing in totality. One of the things though that, I'm happy to say that we do a fair amount of, I think we could be doing more, but I know payers are very interested in this, is like the fundamental question of, "Is this covered?" is a very, very challenging question for so long when it really shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Like, it should be an easy question, yes or no. And, I say that a little tongue in cheek, and it's actually like a pretty serious thing that you need to be able to understand your benefits. But I do think there's like a literacy component of this, of understanding your benefits. And I think payers are more interested in helping in that convo, helping their members understand what's covered and what's not, and taking a little bit less of a black box approach, which is arguably what it's been for 15, 20 years. You don't know. And solving that problem to build trust with your members is something that I think many payers are interested in solving that problem with their membership.
Yeah, that's great to hear because I do think there is that perception of the black box approach. And so now you have technology providers that are like, "Hey, we'll log into the payer portal. We'll scrape all of the eligibility data. We'll normalize it into a format that can now be consumed and entered into the insurance plan tables into a PMS solution." It's a lot of steps that feel like maybe they don't need to actually exist if there was some consistency in the the expected data to be returned electronically and the format within which people could expect that data to be returned. It's turning non-structured data into structured data, and it becomes very challenging, to your point, at the practice level to answer the question for that patient, which then erodes the trust in the relationship that you have with them when you do the procedure and you now have to ask them for more money.
Mike, we talk about trust a lot internally with our teams, internally with our consultants, and then with our clients. And I think there is trust erosion at all different points of our ecosystem. And that happens in the chair, it happens when you get your bill, it happens then when you call the call center, then when you try to log into the portal and you can't remember your password and for some reason you can't reset your password. Right? Like that there's so many steps that, and we all like, I mean, you and I go to the dentist, right? Like, we feel it too. Like, I'm a consumer of my benefits just like you are. And I, candidly, like, there are times when I don't understand it. I'm like, this is literally my job. If I don't know it, um, how can we expect other people to? So we talk about trust erosion, and there are so many steps that, in my mind, can be solved for. And if you can ask ChatGPT to do XYZ and it could take 2 or 3 seconds and spit out like a fairly thoughtful answer, why can't you understand your benefits and ask someone those same sort of questions? And those are the questions that we're talking to our clients a lot about. And there's universal agreement that if more people could understand their benefits, that takes a significant kind of friction moment out of the equation and allows people just, more care and more awareness of what they're getting.
So I hear people talk about this, fantasy world with real-time claims processing, auto adjudication, maybe even, look, you get processed, you get paid immediately. Is this a fantasy? Is it something that can ever be achieved? And kind of what are your viewpoints on it?
We think so. We think it is. I personally do. I don't think it's that far off, but it's not around the corner. I guess that I think there needs to be more work and more acknowledgement done of how that would actually happen. There are some interesting players that we see that kind of, again, sit within this ecosystem that we think could really help and accelerate that. But that being said, in our minds, you should be able to, very similar to pharmacy, which pharmacy in our is closer to real time claims processing, where you pay for your prescription when you go to pick it up. The gap to close there is not that significant, but there is, I think, where we see some of the stumbling is just really kind of core administration systems, and these systems are big, they're old. Mike, you deal with this in your business, but the kind of some of these monolith systems that were built, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, they require some tweaking and integration that just makes real-time claims processing a lot harder. But again, back to the earlier point around collaboration and interest. I think there's systems out there that want to do it. We've had some conversations with some commercial dental claims processing platforms that are very interested in real-time claims processing. But I just think there's some acknowledgement that for that to happen, there needs to be a handshake at the payer side and at the provider office. I do think it's an interesting use case for some national practices that have the scale and the size to be able to maybe entertain some of those conversations.
You mentioned some of the software that's been developed so long ago. There's still dental practices out there whose practice management is comprised of hotkeys and blinking cursors, and it looks almost like a DOS screen you'd expect to be feeding floppy disks in to do your backup. Dental's not exclusive in that. I mean, look, Southwest had all those issues a year or so ago because they were using the same kind of control system for all their reservation management that they had been using for decades. And I think all of us find ourselves sometimes peeking over somebody's shoulder at what they're looking at and going like, "Wow, this looks incredibly outdated." When you think about dental in general, how do you kind of assess technology readiness for the future, and maybe current state as it resides?
Yeah. Yeah, love that. I love this question. We're fortunate West Monroe has a team of technology kind of leaders that do a lot of this sort of current state, kind of look under the hood at architecture from both a scalability perspective, but also from a security and vulnerability perspective as well, which
Can't be overlooked today. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and so I think in that sense, when we talk to companies across the ecosystem, when we talk to private equity clients that are talking about investment and value creation and kind of the value creation story, you know, one of the first questions that comes up is scalability of technology. Can it double? Can it triple? What sort of strain does that put on the technology and the underlying code? And then, how vulnerable is it to any sort of cyber attack and incident and that sort of thing? And then there's hosting and infra, which is a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. So I won't try and fake that one. But I think that's where value is being created is in modernizing kind of the core architecture of a lot of these platforms and a lot of these technologies. And again, that's just my perspective. Mike, you may have a different one, but when a lot of times when we'll do kind of functional and technical diligence for private equity clients, we take a very, very serious look under the hood to not only assess code, like we'll get into actual code quality and do some scanning and kind of really look at what's there and what sort of technology debt can accrue, which everyone has a little bit of tech debt. It's not a function of like if it's there or if it's not, it's just how much. But then it gets to the question of, okay, well, what happens when you double the size of this business? Like how much strain does that put on the underlying architecture? And then, I think that maybe the only other point on this one would just be, and then talking about how do you get based off of the architecture, how do you get data? And then how does that data become an asset to you and to your financial sponsor? And so that's where again another really lever around value becomes: can the platform scale? Can it grow? Is it safe? And then how do you pull data out to really start thinking about kind of value creation with the data that you've got? So we love it. Some financial buyers don't want to go super, super deep. They just like, give us a red, yellow, green. Others really want to get under the hood and look at code and that sort of thing.
We've seen the same. It seems like there's a heightened level of diligence now taking place into tech stack, a large part driven to your earlier point on security, which is can not be negotiable anymore. It's just too detrimental to somebody if something negative happens, and ransomware is unfortunately a real thing that honestly, even with the best solution, can still be a risk. So I think everybody realizes that's what keeps CTOs up at night. But then also the data piece is the part that I don't think can be overlooked, because if you're doing diligence as a private equity organization on a potential investment, you want to be able to trust the data. And unfortunately, with fragmented solutions that are using multiple different systems across a multitude of offices, the data is almost never that trustworthy, even if you're aggregating it at the top, because there's too many opportunities for it to be modified, changed, or used in ways that it was not intended to be, because you're not using enterprise level kind of approach to having the controls over it and making sure that the data dictionaries are consistent. So we see that as those are big headwinds to groups trying to transact if they have not solved for those problems in an adequate way, at least through the eyes of private equity.
And I would add to that, Mike, if you are looking at capitalizing on the upswing of some particular use cases within kind of leveraging I think that's the other reason we've seen so much more interested in the data is if the underlying data, to your point, if it isn't clean, it's not consistent, it's not accessible, it's not standardized, that makes some of the exploratory use cases with AI just so much more difficult, as I'm sure you're hearing. Yeah, it's just that there's a lot of interest in trying to take advantage of kind of the innovation happening right now. And then it's like, yeah, but we can't get to the right data to do it. And then it's everyone's kind of looking around the boardroom like, what the heck are we doing here?
Yeah, maybe we can draw a parallel to the West Monroe business and dental in a sense, because I could draw the same parallel to our business at Planet DDS as it relates to AI and adoption. I think regardless of industry, regardless of role or function that anybody is in, it's a very hot button issue. And people are trying to determine what their strategy is for it moving forward, whether it's enabling their leadership team to use LLMs and training and coaching them on how they can use it for as a strategic thought partner, or whether it's like the latest new tool or something else that you plug in or an agent that now automates this one task that you used to have to do manually before. How do you guys think about it? There's a lot of change here. It's almost overwhelming, I think, for people.
Yeah, it really is. And I would say the only added dimension that we're dealing with is that you also have, every consulting firm in the country is spinning up their AI lab and all that fun stuff. And I would say, I would say West Monroe is our foundation, our DNA is really in technology. So we recognize too that we needed to dive in quickly and really think about our strategy and how we're using it and how we want to advise our clients with it. And yeah, I think healthcare is always going to be just a touch more apprehensive. I think healthcare software and technology is probably a little bit more kind of excited about it. I can tell you our payer clients are really excited, but, just a little apprehensive of understanding contracts and understanding big commercial groups that they've had as customers for 50 years. What is the language in our contracts say? So there's all that kind of apprehension. Now, all that being said, right, I think a lot of the language models are exciting to start thinking about low-hanging fruit use cases. Most of our clients see that kind of within the call center space and understanding like, hey, can we do some kind of agent assist sort of use cases that we can help people answer questions quicker? But this is just my opinion. But when you really start thinking about claims, membership, member history, family history, claim history, like you have so much of that that there're just some really exciting things that I think can happen that can take a little bit of cost out of the business, but ultimately, help inform members and help empower agents to give the right information to members. And so those are the things that we're talking about with our clients and there's some interest and appetite for exploring.
Yeah, it's an interesting study recently. I'm trying to remember who put it out, and unfortunately, I can't. But it was, I think, less than 6% of current job listings cite AI as like a skill that you should have or knowledge that you should have. Like under the requirements, it's not Excel, Word, and LLM proficiency. Like it hasn't made its way even mainstream to the vast majority of new job listings that are out there. So what I try to share with people is like if you're thinking about it, you're probably already ahead of the majority. Now, of course, you're going to be behind some, but you also can't really afford to be laissez-faire about it. You really need to start putting together strategies for how you're going to approach because it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere.
Yeah, totally, totally agree. And it is interesting because because AI is such a broad term, I will give credit to, there are some technologies and some software vendors in the dental space specifically that I think have been doing AI for 5 or 6 years, maybe longer to be candid. Um, but the appetite was never there, and like the national discourse wasn't there, and especially with technology related to fraud, waste, and abuse, which is a really big deal within the dental ecosystem, just understanding, what providers are submitting X-rays and what sort of claims are being submitted at provider offices and all that. There's technology that has been around for a really long time that we're kind of touting some of these fraud detection capabilities that I just think it's kind of interesting that, 5 or 6 years ago, some of these kind of niche point solutions arguably was doing AI, and now there's so much more appetite for it, and so it catches a lot more conversations, now than it did, even 4 or 5 years ago.
It's like that whole bridging the chasm technology adoption curve where it's, people just initially resist it because it's change. It doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or otherwise. It's change and it's different for sure. You talk about the companies that have been doing AI for quite some time, and radiographic imaging AI solutions have been in the market for quite a while now, and have been adopted by a lot of the large DSOs and have made huge traction in the independent practice space as well. Do you view that as a component to what will probably be required for real times claims processing? Like, will the X-rays have to have AI attached to them by approved providers, which will help move the process quicker in the adjudication of the claims? Is that something that you could see as being a component to it?
A component, certainly. I think that is one component of a broader answer to the question of just cleaner claims, and I think the cleaner the claim and kind of the more standardized we're getting with that, and I think as the practice management software kind of consolidates to some of the major players, I just think the claims get cleaner, the easier those are to process very quickly, and, you know, is a catalyst for saying, "Hey, everything from Planet DDS, we know these providers, we know these claims, they have X-rays, let's just do this, like, real time." Like, that those are to me the stepping stones to that conversation, and I think today, and this may not shock you, but may shock some of your listeners, dealing with claims intake for on the payer side, they're still getting, I mean, you're still getting faxes, you're still getting claims that look like they're written on napkins, like, the amount of variance out there today is still kind of is massive and quite frankly, head scratching at times. So, it may seem like a no duh comment, but the more electronic they get, the more standardized they get, the quicker that we're gonna get to that sort of moment of just really, really fast adjudication.
No, I think it's actually a really interesting comment to point out because it's easy to make the assumption that everything's done EDI and electric and that, you're not actually sending these in fax anymore. And, when the change incident happened, I know that a lot of people had to revert back to kind of, hey, we're mailing this stuff in, we're sending it in. But there's the component, probably a not insignificant amount that creates a pretty heavy workload on the payers, I would imagine still today.
Yeah, and that's why you're seeing some of the clearinghouses that are stepping up to the plate and taking different pieces of that pie. But the other thing there specifically, Mike, is those clearinghouses, which again, 10 years ago, their whole business was intake of claims, cleaning them, standardizing them, giving them to the payer. I would say even that business model is changing, where like they're doing so much more now than just kind of claims standardization. Again, back to that ecosystem, they're broadening their value story and they're kind of moving up and down market to do things like credentialing, and they're doing things like fraud, waste, and abuse. And so, we've even talked to some that are taking a more active integration stance with health plans and saying, "Hey, we have all this dental data. Let's connect with the health plans and let's try to put some really cool stories together of how to kind of generate better wellness outcomes," which again, we think is really neat and exciting.
Speaking of kind of broadening offerings, I just read one of the largest payers introduced membership plan. Do you have a viewpoint on membership plans and kind of a perspective on where they fit within this world and their viability?
I think they are viable. I think it is the beginning of a trend that we're gonna see more of, and I don't know, Mike, enough to say kind of where the value kind of story lies, but I would say they're very interesting to me. They're starting to pop up more. They act like kind of a a dental benefit is not entirely complex. Like it can be administered fairly easily. And so that's where some of those like kind of a membership plan or a discount card, like that model makes sense to me. I think it is a trend worth watching, certainly.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, we've seen membership players in the space for quite some time. And then to have now a payer come out and say like, well, hey, we're going to have our own platform here as well, almost kind of validates that there is value to be found there. And it makes things more simple also for the patients in many ways.
It simplifies the value chain. We talk a lot about vertically integrated systems, and we talk a lot about the value that can be gleaned from vertically integrated systems. So whether it's membership plans, whether it's payer-owned provider offices, whether it's all of those things at least to us and to me, signify some change in the historical ecosystem. And again, it's appetite up and down and horizontally just for a more integrated system.
So we'll wrap here in just a second. I'm curious though, Ben, as you kind of continue on your professional journey, where do you seek new information? How do you continue to learn? What's your approach?
I'll tell you what, this isn't meant to sound glib, but the old adage of kind of follow the money. I think it is very interesting to see where investment is being made. And we've seen some investment in dental. We've seen it in the provider offices. We've seen it in software. We've seen it in some of the kind of ancillary brands that sit around dental. So, implants, vet, vision, and I would say like we like staying close to where the dollars are flowing. And so I would say that's probably the first one. And then I think the second one is there's no shortage of reporting on the health insurance market in the US. And I always think that dental lags health plans by a few years, maybe longer. But, I think a lot of the trends that you see within the big national health plans, dental's not far behind. But I think there's some uniqueness, which we've kind of talked about already. So I think, really following, some of the healthcare policy is really interesting right now. Thinking about some changes in policy creates opportunities for people. I think, there's some government plans that are kind of highly scrutinized right now based on profitability and then aging workforce. And there's a lot to consume within healthcare. And then I like just, I guess, maybe having a dental perspective alongside all of it.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate it. Where can people find yourself and West Monroe?
I should have had a better answer to this question. Reach out, Mike. Hopefully, I don't know if my email is anywhere on this podcast or anything, but we love talking to new people. We love talking to plans. We love talking to providers. We love talking to entrepreneurs and investors. So I'm always available to talk. And Mike, I would say big kudos to you. I think this dental market has just been kind of underserved for a long time, and that's why I love it, and that's why I love working with my clients in this space. So I think what you're doing to bring some more visibility here is awesome, and I'm really appreciative of you having me on.
No, appreciate it. And don't your last answer was perfect. I didn't expect you to hit us with like your TikTok
We're gonna get, like,
or your IG or
yeah,
anything. So,
smash, smash
we're
the
good.
like button, like get on all my social stuff.
That's right. That's right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ben. Appreciate it.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.